Monday, 11:30 a.m., March 24th, 1913. Harry Alps of the United States Weather Bureau in Dayton finished his morning correlation of the weather data and then lit a cigarette. He settled back in the worn wooden desk chair and blew a cloud of blue-white smoke toward the ceiling, a small frown creasing his brow and a thoughtful look on his face. The readings of the various gauges disturbed him because now the possibility of flooding, at least in the low-lying areas of the city, had become a probability. The river had risen more rapidly than he had expected and showed no early signs of cresting. He thought about the weekend just past and shook his head wryly. Saturday, the river level at the Main Street Bridge had stood at 2 feet, and it had been such a beautifully sunny day. He'd looked forward to a nice, bright Easter Sunday. He tried to recall any Easter in the past when the weather had been really nice, but couldn't think of one. This year's had been no exception. Dawn on Sunday had broken with pouring rain, and the entire day had been stormy. The wind was very gusty, sometimes even violent, and throughout the day the clouds had looked queer, not like Dayton's usual storm clouds. The rainfall had tapered off toward evening, and by midnight had become only a fine drizzle, with intermittent harder showers. But then, at 5 o'clock this morning, the heavens had opened and rain descended in great sheets, often so hard it was difficult to see across the street. Several times during the morning, the sky had brightened, and the sun seemed on the verge of peeping through. And then the black, heavy masses of odd-looking clouds would sweep across the sky, shooting out jagged bolts of lightning and sounding an almost continual roll of thunder over the city. To Alps, it had seemed cooler out than the 58 degrees registered on the Bureau's thermometer, and he noted that the humidity was 100%, meaning a saturated atmosphere and therefore no evaporation. From 5 a.m. until now, nearly an inch and a half of rain had fallen, and by 7 a.m., the river gauge had indicated 7 feet. Since then, it had risen steadily at almost a foot an hour until now. It was 11.6 feet and higher than it had been at any time since early January. Alps sighed and picked up his telephone. "George," he told his assistant, "looks like the lowlands are going to get it again. You and Harold start calling the residences in those areas to warn them. Be sure to let them know it isn't another case of possible flooding, but they'll be getting water in a few hours, if they haven't already. I'll help you two with the calls after I contact Dodds." He broke the connection and called Dayton's safety director, Mays Dodds, explained the situation, and suggested he have the city employees set about shutting off the storm sewers and starting up the big electric pumps that kept the lowlands dry when the river level rose above them on the other side of the levee. Dodds listened carefully. "How bad do you think it might get?" he asked when Alps finished. "Depends a lot on whether or not this rain quits soon, Alps replied, adding, "Not only here, but to the north of us. We just got a report from Piqua, and they've recorded 3.7 inches of rain already. That hasn't even reached us yet. Without any more rain, we'll get a crest of 14 feet or more anyway, so the low areas will definitely get lots of water. I have a crew calling the residents in those areas to warn them, but it might be a good idea to alert the police and fire departments in case the situation gets worse." There was a short pause, and then Dodds asked, "Might it?" "It could," Alps answered immediately. "How much worse?" Let's see, Dodd said slowly. Flood level is what? 18 feet? And if it went over that, what about the downtown area? We'd probably have relatively serious flooding in some of the residential areas, and maybe a few inches on the downtown streets, but I don't think any more than that. Official flood stage is 18 feet, but the levee should be able to contain up to 23 feet. Dodd sounded relieved. I'll get my men on the job right away, he said, and don't worry about the police and fire departments. I'll alert them. Is there any chance the flooding will get so bad we'll need the National Guard? I doubt that, Alp said hastily. Even if it should come to that, we've got plenty of time. I'll be sure to keep in touch with you, Mayor Phillips, too. And if it begins to look bad enough, I'll let you know right away, okay? That's fine, Maze Dodd said. Might it be a good idea if I called the newspapers and advised them too? They'll probably want to print a warning for the low areas. 4:15 p.m., Monday. For the third time that afternoon, the president of the sprawling National Cash Register Company at the southern outskirts of Dayton walked to his ninth floor office window and looked out over the city. A pall of industrial and residential smoke, held low by the atmosphere, made visibility poor, and the winding Miami River, greatly swollen now, reflected the dismal iron gray of the sky. At 68, John H. Patterson was a rather slight, impeccably dressed individual who wore small gold-rimmed eyeglasses and sported a fine, thick mustache, the nation's foremost pioneer of industrial welfare. His was the iron hand that had founded the firm 30 years before with a modest $15,000 and molded it into the huge multi-million dollar enterprise it was now. But on this afternoon, he was plagued with serious thoughts not connected with the business of manufacturing cash registers. The rain drummed monotonously on the windowsill, and for a long while the industrialist stood there, hands clasped behind his back. Then he called to his secretary. Mr. Barringer, I want an umbrella. I'm going to the roof. John Barringer, long accustomed to highly unusual comments and requests from his employer, showed no surprise. He got the umbrella and accompanied Patterson to the top of the 10-story building. The two men walked over to the northwest corner, high above South Main Street, and looked silently out over the downtown area, a mile and a half to the north. Barringer had no idea what the matter was, but he knew that his employer was indeed troubled. Patterson cleared his throat several times and pursed his lips so that his mustache seemed to become a cushion for his nose. He also rubbed his right thumb over the fingertips of the same hand. Small indications they were to what the man was thinking, but important nonetheless. Barringer had seen Patterson use these same gestures individually on numerous occasions before important decisions were made. Rarely, however, had he seen all three made at once. The 4:30 whistle blew, and they watched as the several thousand men who worked here left for home, many of them living in the residential areas surrounding the plant. It's raining out, Patterson said, as if neither man had been aware of that fact until now. It's also quitting time. Let's go home, Mr. Barringer.